Welcome to the Resilience series. I'm Stephanie Weaver, author of the upcoming Migraine Relief Plan Cookbook, which has the theme of resilience and is available for pre-order now. My guest today is Marra Gad. Marra is a film and television producer, actor, and the author of a beautiful memoir, The Color of Love. Marra speaks internationally about her own transracial adoption in 1970 and her experiences being Black, white, biracial, and Jewish. She's an upcoming recipient of the Women of Reform Judaism's Empowered Woman Award. Welcome, Marra.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We've waited a long time for this interview, so I'm super excited to talk to you. So tell us about your memoir, The Color of Love. If you want, you can start with a title or just kind of jump in.
Being biracial and Jewish, I'm also sort of on the verge of turning 52. So that should give a time frame for your listeners. Um, is still considered by many to be unusual in terms of makeup, right? There are people that are still living with the misconception that all Jews are white, people that live with the misconception that Black people are Muslim or Christian. And so when you present in a way that tends to put people on on their guard about who you are, it leaves you with a lifetime of stories. And working in Hollywood a few years ago, people came to me and they were trying to pitch me my own story and tell me what my story was. And I was like, no, 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 that's not my story. Somebody referred to me as a tragic mulatto girl. And in that moment, it became really clear to me that I do have a story to tell and that it was my honor and I think obligation to tell it myself. And so that's where the book was born. And I also think that I finally was ready to speak. Writing a memoir is such a naked experience. It's literally like you're walking naked out into the world, family, friends, strangers, colleagues, and you have to be ready to do that. And I think at this stage of life, I was finally ready, and society was finally ready to say, oh, we have to expand our stories to include people like me.
Absolutely. So it does cover your a fair bit of your life, your childhood growing up. You were absolutely loved and adored by your parents who adopted you. So that's a wonderful thing. But then there were family members who did not accept you, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So one of the themes that I saw in the book was the notion of belonging, and it touched me really deeply, this feeling of belonging. But the sense that I got the sense sometimes that maybe love doesn't conquer all. What do you think about that, since it's your story?
To your point earlier, my book really does speak to the tremendous pain and at times actual hate that I have endured, that my family has endured, simply because I am biracial. Um, and my belief is that love is the most powerful force in the universe. And I think because I know what it is to be hated simply because I exist, I also know what it is to be deeply, deeply, profoundly, unconditionally loved. And I know the power of that. And so for me, love is the reason why I'm here and I'm still alive. And it is the foundation of my resilience. It is the foundation of my existence. It is the foundation of my thriving. I think when we talk about love, there is this notion that it will mean there's no more racism and no more anti-Semitism and no more hate. But we have to start with ourselves and let that ripple out into the world. It isn't like some sort of supernatural film, where there's love and there's hate and there's this and one wins and the other one dies. It is human nature to hold bias. And sometimes that will express itself as hate.
Absolutely. So, knowing you on social media, you frequently share your experiences about being excluded. You're too black to be Jewish, you're too white and Jewish to be black. What do you hope to teach people about your experience?
I think a couple of things. First, that what we say and do matters deeply and it affects other people profoundly. There is this strange sense in the world, in particular since the advent of social media, I think, that we can say and do anything and it doesn't matter that someone else is on the other end receiving that. And so one, I would want people to come away understanding that. Two, that when you are biracial, transracial, in your family, multiracial, there is this sense that the tribes that made you don't fully embrace you. And because of that, we have an opportunity to build our own tribes, to open our hearts perhaps in a different way, because we do know what it is to feel like we're not being warmly embraced. There is this thing that I think people do where there are boxes that are arbitrarily given, and this is what it is to be Jewish, and this is what it is to be Black, and this is what it is to be gay, and this, and if you don't tick those boxes, people don't know what to do with you. But the boxes are the problem. There's plenty of room for all of us to be ourselves. Um, and I think that we need that message more.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. You live with the experience of both what are called referred to as microaggressions and then overt aggression on a fairly daily basis. And I did ask your permission to ask you this question because I didn't want you to have to talk about trauma if you didn't want to.
Thank you.
How do you how do you define those for yourself and for us? And how do you build up your resistance when it's just constantly happening?
One of the things, the notion of micro and macroaggressions, that terminology, at least in my experience, is relatively new. I actually don't use it. I'd like to start there. For me, aggression is aggression. And this notion that we are quantifying in some way that it's big or small, or it's madness to me. I had somebody say to me once when they gave a speech saying that it is not racism to send somebody like me to the kitchen automatically to fetch coffee and to assume that that's the only reason why I'm there. And I reached out to this person and I said, how can you say that's not racism? To assume that the only reason I could be in a space is to serve you is absolutely racism. And she said, well, I asked a bunch of people and they said it wasn't. And I said, did you ask a bunch of white people? And she said, I did. And I said, okay, well, maybe to you it's a small thing, but to me, it's not. So I don't use those terms. I think aggression is aggression and it's all painful. And the more we claim that pain and speak to it, the better chance we have of creating a greater understanding around it. That having been said, it has taken me a lifetime to figure out how not to take it in. Because sometimes I feel like I bathe in it. And letting it seep into your soul is poison. It's toxic. And so I have done a great deal of work to figure out the things I need to be out in the world. Part of that is certainly about therapy. I've been in therapy for about 30 years. And I imagine I will be for the rest of my life. I meditate and pray every morning for easily about 30 minutes before I start my day to put my head and my spirit in the right place. And when something hurts, and I think this is the biggest part, I say, that hurt. We are also sort of expected to swallow a lot of it and to say, well, that's just how life is, and I'm used to it. I never want to be used to being marginalized and abused. So that's where I come at it from, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. One of the things that has really taught me a lot about following you on social media is how exhausting it has to be to have this happen all the time and
Yes.
you're not expecting it. You're just at the nice store returning clothes, or you're, walking down the street, or you're at a family event, or you're at a conference with other Jewish people and something happens. I mean, there's been a number of things that I've seen that you've shared. And I think I don't want to speak for all white people because that's inappropriate, but I think for the people that thought Obama being elected meant we were past racism, let's just frame it that way.
Yeah.
It's pretty eye-opening to follow someone like yourself and see that it's almost a daily thing. And it just has to be so tiring to just like, like I don't have to gird my loins to walk outside,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
And I feel like what white folks don't understand is that people of color do. And
Yes.
regardless of how you choose to respond to it, not respond to it, share it, not share it, etc., it's there all the time. Like I don't have to worry about getting pulled over by a cop. And if I did, I wouldn't worry that I was going to die as a result of it. I mean, those are sort of the big obvious things.
Mhm.
But the story of that you shared and then tried to make right with the department store was shouldn't have been shocking to me, but it was shocking to me. I mean, you were literally there just to try to return some very
Yes.
expensive clothes. You were very nicely dressed, and this woman just starts screaming at you because you're there and you're black. And I'm like, why does this still surprise me? I mean, I know it happens, but so the reason I wanted to have you talk about it was not to re-traumatize you, but to help all of us who kind of don't still get it enough to be aware that it is a daily occurrence.
It's very interesting. It has been a daily occurrence since I drew my first breath, right? It is the minute you come into the world and you look like me, it's a daily occurrence. And what I find fascinating is that I would talk about things in my 20s and my 30s and my 40s, and people would say, "Oh, Marra, you're so sensitive. You're you misunderstood. They really didn't mean it. Their heart was in the right place. They had good intentions." But after George Floyd's murder, and the world saw almost 10 minutes of the life being literally choked out of a black man by a police officer, people started to say, "Oh, these things really do happen." And I said, yes, they happen every day. They have been happening every day. And we now live in this world where, because of video and social media, people are being forced to bear witness to what is just sort of a part of life for the rest of us.
Yes.
Um, and on some level, I have to believe that that is the only path toward making it go away. Like, unless we all believe that these things are real and are really happening, because it takes all of us. It isn't the election of one president. It isn't one person or one group of people. It is our collective heart that will lift us free. But we have to work together, and we can't do that if people don't believe it's happening. As for why people are still surprised, I think it's because people don't want to believe that it's true. You don't want to believe that these things happen all the time. And so you say, "I can't believe it. I can't believe it." Believe it. I beg of you. Believe it. It will set both of us free.
100%. And thank you so much for being willing to educate us, those of us watching this, and just speak so eloquently about it, because it's that's why I wanted to have you on the show. And I also really encourage people to read your book, because there's something about memoir where you really, you're in someone else's skin, and you're feeling those things the way that they are feeling them, if it's well written as yours is. And so I really wanted to encourage people, if they missed it when it came out, to take a look at it. So that being said, you ended up taking care of an elderly aunt and uncle, and the aunt had treated you very terribly during your life, because she was racist.
Oh, yes.
Um, where did you find the strength to do that? I mean, it just seems so impossible.
Um, I know that this will sound very simple, but to me, it was simply the right thing to do. I do believe each of us has a voice inside of us, and we call it a bunch of different things, that at crossroads moments will say, "No, this is the right way." You know what the right way is. And sometimes the right way is terrifying, and sometimes it's uncomfortable. But I do believe that for me, it was simply the right thing to do. This is a woman that had been like a surrogate parent to my mother at one point in her life. My mother, who to this day, at 77 years old, she will step in front of me to protect me. She is 77 years old and still my greatest protector. And when the breadth of my aunt's racism came to light, my mother cut this woman out of her life. And so I wanted to make sure that when we knew that she needed care, I wanted to give my mother that peace of mind. And at the end of the day, what would it say about me if I turned my back on someone that I knew who needed care? What does that say about me? In my version of life, it would mean that her hate won and changed my heart. And I'm not here for that. So it was not enjoyable. It was not easy, but for me, it was the right thing to do. And if I were presented with it all over again, I would do exactly what I did. I have no regrets about that.
Well, it's extraordinary, and the way you just described it was also extraordinary. And it also makes me, well, all of it makes my heart hurt. But especially when you deal with all of that and then you still have to be the bigger person and take the high road because it's the right thing to do. It just seems really unfair, but
I I I think that a part of, and I talk about this a lot because people ask me about this moment a lot. People say, well, how did you find it in your heart to forgive her and take care of her? And I think the way that I define forgiveness is not that she said, I'm sorry, and I said, it's okay, and we had this warm embrace. That's not what happened. That was never going to happen. But for me, forgiveness means not carrying the pain of what someone else has done with me my whole life, like an overcoat that's laden down with stones, letting it pull me under. Forgiveness allows me to be free in moments that otherwise would drown me. And so it helps if I'm able to say, this is the right thing, and I'm going to do the thing that I know is the right thing, and then I'm not going to carry it with me. But again, that is therapy, and that's meditation, and that is, I work very hard to be this person and not let the world or hate or other people's behavior change me into a monster, because I think I would be a monster otherwise.
yes, thank you for that beautiful answer. We've talked a little bit about resilience. You're a writer and television producer. Does resilience play into your work in any way?
Resilience and patience, um, and and just sort of understanding that whether it's professionally or personally or familially or whatever, life is a series of elastic adjustments, and that the path that sometimes we think is going to do this will do that, and it's our part in the play to adjust. So I don't, it's so funny. I thought a lot about the word resilience in preparation for being in conversation with you. I don't think I've ever used it as far as the way that I would describe myself. I think I just go about the business of getting up every day and seeing what life brings me, and knowing that I have the tools to handle it.
Well, I would define of resilience that way. So it was great to hear you describe it, but not even use the term. So my last question for everyone, and you may have already covered this, but what are some of your self-care resilience strategies? You talked about therapy, you talked about meditation. Do you have other things that you do?
No, I mean, I do keep, I'm very deliberate about the way that I live my life. I have boundaries that I'm fiercely protective of. I inhabit a big world with a lot of people in it, but I keep the circle around me small. I use terms deliberately. Family and friend are very deliberate terms. And so, in addition to the therapy, in addition to the meditation, in addition to being able to speak to pain when it happens, or anger, or whatever, I also make sure that I treat myself with the same love that I would give other people. And that means surrounding myself with the best. And certainly that starts with the people that I allow into my life in an intimate way. I think that we all too often we focus on quantity in general rather than quality. And I've learned that for me, it has to be the best and what's aligned with my values. That's the only thing I have space for.
That's a beautiful answer. Marra, thank you again for being here today and sharing your experience. Please visit marrabgad.com. That's MARRABGAD.com to learn more about her work. You can order The Color of Love wherever you like to buy books, and we do encourage you to support independent bookstores if you can. Check out other episodes of the Resilience series on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Follow me at SWeaverMPH to learn more about my upcoming book, The Migraine Relief Plan Cookbook, which is due out this summer and is available for pre-order now. Thanks so much for watching.